Chapter 2. It had been 6 years since Marissa had last been sentenced by her mother to the confines of her bedroom. 6 years since she had taken a pair of scissors and cut her sleeping cousin's pigtails. She had cut the pigtails because, Marissa couldn't remember why exactly. She could only recall how she'd sat by her bedroom window and watched rain slide down the glass. Her sadness was like the rain, gray, cold, and constant. She was 8 then, with a little baby fat that rolled over the elastic waistband of her Cinderella pajamas. Now that she was 14, the baby fat had spread. She lay on her unmade bed, bathing her legs in the afternoon sun that cut through the window. She wiggled her toes, their painted red nails chipped in places. She debated with herself whether thumping Roberto had been the right thing to do. But after she took a sip of cream soda, she concluded that the sorry rat deserved such punishment, and then some. He had cheated on her best friend in the whole world. Her cell phone began to ring, and she searched wildly about her bedroom. Her eyes raked over the chest of drawers, cluttered with soda cans, unused bottles of perfume, lipsticks squat as silver bullets, candy wrappers, burger wrappers, CDs of rockers she never listened to anymore, a single sock, a dried bouquet from a wedding, and other assorted trash that she knew she could cram into paper bags before the short journey to the garbage can. Her room was a mess. It's probably Alicia, she told herself. However, when she picked up the phone, she heard a guy say, "Renee, it's me, Trung. I can't figure out the problem." The problem? Marissa was at a loss as to what to say. A new sensation because her mouth was always ready to gush out words. "You there?" the boy asked. "Renee, you there? Your battery's dead?" She clicked off her cell phone and looked at it. "Dang," she muttered as she let it roll from her fingers into her bed, as if it were a gun, and she had just committed a horrible act. The cell phone wasn't hers. She bit her lower lip and raised her eyes towards the ceiling. "I bet it belongs to that other guy," she told herself. She recalled the boy who had been with Roberto, the one who had finally pulled her away from him and whose eyeglasses had come off. During the tussle, their cell phones had fallen, and each must have walked away with the others. She called her own cell number, wiggling her toes as she waited for that guy to pick up, where her own rushed voice came on rudely. "You leave a message, and you speak clearly. You know what I mean." Marissa grimaced at the awkward cadence of her message and the attitude behind her voice. "That's me?" she muttered in disbelief and hung up. She promised herself that once she got her cell phone back, she was going to change the greeting. Her mother rattled the door with a heavy knock. "Marissa," she yelled. Marissa sucked her breath and held it. "Marissa, it's time to eat." Marissa pocketed the cell phone, let her breath out like a deflating balloon, and yelled, "Okay, okay." She brushed her hair behind her ears, checked her face in the mirror on the wall, and muttered, "She's always on me." Dinner time. Marissa's father sat at the end of the table. He had the eyes of a worker who wakes up before dawn and starts off for the day just as the pinkish sun appears in the east. They were tired, puffy, and half-closed. Her father was a carpenter, a man who often returned home with flakes of wood in his thin graying hair. His rough hands were sometimes bleeding, his fingertips puffed from hits with his hammer. Marissa plopped into the chair at the kitchen table. The fourth chair, where her brother Ralphie used to sit, held a basket of clean laundry. Her brother had gone away to Bakersfield State. Now it was usually only the three of them, and sometimes Alicia and sometimes one of the many aunts. "Hey, Dad," Marissa greeted. She scooted her chair in and picked up her spoon. Her father wagged his head, his way of saying hi. He was a quiet man who preferred gestures to long-winded sentences. "Tell him what happened," her mother started in immediately. Here we go, Marissa thought. Dinner talk about my wicked, wicked ways. She played dumb and said, "What?" "You know what." Her mother blew on her bowl of albodigas. The surface of the hot broth rippled. "You mean that I skipped school and went to see Alicia? I know Dad would go see his best friend if he was in the hospital." She looked at her father, who was dipping a chunk of sourdough bread into his soup. "Huh, Dad?" "I don't have a best friend," he answered simply. "Pete," Marissa reminded him. She set her spoon like an oar into her soup and stirred, creating a curtain that made the peas and chunks of carrots swim in the circle. "Oh, Pete," her father remarked as he brought a paper napkin to his stubbly face. "He ran away with another woman, left his wife and kids. How can I be friends with an hombre like that?" "At least he ran away with another woman, not a guy," Marissa replied. Then she wished she could pull back that string of words and push it down her throat. It was rude, she realized, inconsiderate, and yes, plain dumb. That's not funny at all, her mother said. Whatever, Marissa said absently. Again she wished she could retract the comment. Don't whatever me, her mother scolded. With a large fork like a pitchfork, she stabbed at some bread in the basket and told her husband their daughter had cut school to see Alicia. What did he think of that? The father slurped his soup, but didn't say anything. Marissa waited for her mother to elaborate on her adventures at the hospital. She waited for her to tell her father how she'd had to chunk it up with Roberto, but her mother didn't bring up the fight outside the elevator. Bless her, Marissa thought. Maybe she's really not so bad after all. Perhaps her father would have grumbled and lectured her by telling her a long story about how he was the young man who kept his temper by counting to 10 in Spanish. This was in Fresno, where young men at street corners fell over like bowling pins. Times then, as now, were dangerous. Your friend, Alicia, is she okay? Marissa's father tore his bread in half and dipped one piece into his bowl. He ate with his face close to the bowl. She's getting out of the hospital tomorrow, Marissa answered. She slapped her bowl with butter before she dipped it into her soup. She has to use crutches. She shouldn't have been with that boy, her mother interjected. Raphael, I had a nail in the front tire. What, Chavallo? Her father asked. And did you get the tire fixed? Helen's son, Marissa's mother answered. She told them at Rudy's Tire and Wheel had fixed the tire himself. She reminded him that Helen was the person she had known when they both worked in a drapery shop. I don't know her, her father remarked. Yeah, you do, viejo, her mother mumbled with her mouth full. Helen Lopez. Her husband is the one who started the nursery on Jensen Avenue. They have a real nice roses. Her father answered, Oh, now I remember. He lifted a glass of water, drank, and set his water glass down. Marissa could tell that her father didn't remember, not Helen or Helen's husband. He was a poor pretender. This soup is good, Marissa hoped that her compliment would steer the conversation away from Roberto the rat. She blew on her soup and nearly spilled it when her cell phone, stuffed in her front pocket, started to ring. Her father raised his eyes from the bowl. You got ants in your pants? He smiled at his feeble joke. Marissa returned the smile. She excused herself and rushed from the kitchen into the living room and finally the hallway where she clicked on the cell phone. Yeah, she said. This is Renee, the voice said. I don't know no Renee. She grimaced. Dang, I sound stupid, she thought. Why can't I say things right? We met, Renee started to say. Oh, yeah, at the hospital, she completed. And you have my cell phone and I've got yours. Silent, a branch scratched the window on the side of the house. The furnace was kicking on in the basement. Ages of more silence. And you want yours back, huh? Marissa finally asked. She brought a strand of hair into her mouth and began to nibble it like a straw. I guess that's why I'm calling. Where do you live? Marissa asked. She could tell that he was a shy person. His voice was small, like a little boy's. Do you know where Willow Park is? He asked. I live over there, near Hamilton Magnet. Marissa knew the area. It had nice homes and green lawns, and its own private security guard that circled the neighborhood like a shark. She remembered how she and Alicia had gone trick-or-treating up there and hauled away bags crammed full of wrapped candy bars, not fistfuls of cheap candy, raisins, backyard apples, and walnuts. She remembered devouring the candy until her jaw hurt and chocolate darkened the corners of her mouth. That park's too far away. I don't know how I'm going to get your phone to you. I got a bike, he replied. Do you go to Washington with Roberto? I could meet you tomorrow. If you want to, she said. How do you know Roberto anyway? I tutor him in math. Marissa cringed at the sound of her mother's voice calling from the kitchen. She was yelling, Marissa, you gotta help with the dishes. Marissa held the phone away from her mouth. I'm talking on the phone, Mom. She screamed in return when her mother didn't cry. Then get off the phone. Marissa raised the cell phone back to her ear. Sorry, she told Renee. Can you meet at 3:30? How about 4:30? Renee asked. I got a chess meeting. Chess meeting? She nearly exclaimed, but she held her tongue and agreed to meet in front of her school. She hung up and stared at the phone, trying to reassemble what the boy looked like. Her memory could only bring up Roberto's startled look when she landed an impressive punch to his gut. Dishes, Marissa yelled. Marissa returned to the kitchen. She slurped the rest of her soup and nearly fit a whole roll into her mouth before she thought better of it. She wasn't hungry, plus she could hear her mother's footsteps paddling towards the kitchen. Her mother would badger her about eating too much. One bowl of soup should be enough for any girl. She thought for a moment that it was like a prisoner's food, bread and water. Her mother came into the kitchen. "Mira," she said. She waved something in Marissa's face that at first she thought was a dead bat. "You washed your black sock with the whites." "I didn't do it," Marissa snapped back. "What, did the sock walk into the whites and say bleach me?" Her mother started to stuff the leftover rolls into a plastic bag. Marissa plucked the once black sock from her mother's hand and pushed it into her back pocket like a flag used in flag football. "Mija, I don't want you to cut school again," her mother said softly. "I won't," Marissa said weakly. "We want you to do well in school." She hugged her daughter and said that she was a good girl. "You're our only daughter." To Marissa, that was one of the sweetest things her mother had said to her in a long time. Her mother usually told her things to do, pick up clothes, put the milk away, and was constantly warning her about the trouble she could get into if she wasn't careful. "I want to do good too. I don't want to mess up." Her mother hugged her and left the kitchen when her husband began wailing that there was something wrong with the remote control. Marissa gathered the bowls and spoons from the table and carried them to the sink. She turned on the water and waited for it to rise in the plastic tub before she submerged the dinnerware. She squirted dish soap into the steamy tub, pushing her pudgy fingers into rubber gloves, and started on her evening chore. She found herself thinking about that boy with the sweet voice, whose face she could have remembered if she hadn't been so busy pummeling Roberto.